Ladies and gentlemen, oh, it's so nice to see you all here. And I cannot tell you how pleased we are that we sold out. Yes. In my career, I have hosted a bazillion events, and this is truly one of the most meaningful ways to use my time and my voice, considering the context. My name's Sheri Somerville, and I am the executive producer at Ballet Edmonton, and I will be your host for this evening. Thank you. This event is also hosted by Right to Learn Afghanistan, formerly Canadian Women for the Women of Afghanistan. And tonight we are raising awareness and raising money. Since 2021, women and girls, I have to wear my glasses, in Afghanistan have been living in a state of gender apartheid. The Right to Learn Afghanistan exists to make the right to education a reality for Afghan women and girls. They do so knowing that the forces of power have set forth to silence them. Since 2021, women and girls in Afghanistan have been living in a state of gender apartheid. This organization, Right to Learn, has trained over 10,000 teachers and built over 300 libraries and labs. In 2021, when the Taliban returned to power and forbade girls over 12 from accessing education, Right to Learn pivoted to online education to create new opportunities for continued learning. When I asked for some speaking notes to understand a little bit more about the Right to Learn and the work of our guest speaker, Zahra Nader, I was forwarded a letter which I would love to read to you. It's from a 15-year-old girl living in exile in Pakistan, having escaped the Taliban, and it articulates so poignantly the reason that we're gathering tonight. Her name is Tahara. She's 15. To the listeners of our stories and the amplifiers of our voices, in a place where they always want to silence me and muffle my voice, I say loudly to the whole world, I am Tahara, 15 years old, a girl who lights the lamp of hope in the darkness. We women and girls of Afghanistan have experienced many hardships and limitations. We are always discriminated. We have been deprived of our rights, the most basic rights, to access education and to be free. We have been expelled from our country, and I live in another country, Pakistan. We have been humiliated as immigrants and as women, but we have never accepted this. We have broken the silence, and we are fighting for our rights. We have used the very basic facilities we have to read and to write. I want to say that we want the world to hear us, to see us, to feel us. We don't want to be humiliated or ignored. We want to be heard and seen. Girls should not be limited and discriminated. As a woman and girl and a human, I don't want to be ignored. I am sending this letter as my voice. We strive to make a better world every day. We work for girls and women to be free and independent. We are not dead in a corner. We are still alive. We have our dreams and our hopes. From Tahara. Wow, so that is the essence of what we're here tonight talking about. Before we proceed any further, I would like to offer a few housekeeping acknowledgements. I'd like to extend a special thank you to those individuals who stepped up as event sponsors of this evening. These people or organizations have ensured we're able to support Right to Learn with a meaningful fundraising effort tonight and take care of all our event costs so that your ticket prices and any money that I'm able to extract from you later in the auction is not paying for food and wine. Those are Janet Franklin, Yolanda Van Wachem, Linda Cowan, Doug Stollery, Marie Gordon, Jill Davies Shaw and Whitespark, Alberta View magazines, and please note that you can take home a copy of Alberta Views tonight. There's one for everybody, kindly donated by Alberta Views. And a very big thank you to Maggie Mitchell, who has covered the entire cost of all your food and beverages tonight. This evening is graciously co-sponsored by MacEwan University, MacEwan University is situated in Treaty 6 territory. It welcomes Indigenous peoples from across the world as students, faculty, staff, and guests. MacEwan celebrates the rich cultural heritage of these people and the ancestral lands on which this university sits today. Acknowledging traditional territory is just one part of recognizing and moving beyond colonization so we can strengthen the relationships ongoing. I would now like to invite Sheena Rossiter from MacEwan U to say a few words on behalf of the university.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Welcome, everyone. We're so honored and privileged to be hosting everybody here tonight. My name is Sheena Rossiter, an assistant professor and head of media production in the Department of Communication. And as a woman journalist, when Marie Gordon approached our chair, Ray Rosales, to ask if we could host this event, it took about a nanosecond for us to say yes. Our job as journalists is that we hold power to account. We especially want to support voices that don't get heard, like those that Zahra supports with Zan Times. So we're pleased, honored, and privileged to host you here tonight, and your courage and bravery is none other. I just can't simply imagine, and we're really looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheena. And I would also like to invite Melissa Bottoms from the audience. Melissa is the Fund Development Officer at Right to Learn at their head office in Calgary. Come on up, Melissa.
Wow, just to see a sold-out audience, this is amazing, and I'm so pleased to be here from Calgary tonight to be part of this event and to hear Zahra speak. Good evening, everyone. My name is Melissa Bottoms, and I'm the Fund Development Manager at Right to Learn Afghanistan. And on behalf of all of us at Right to Learn, I would like to thank you so sincerely for being here tonight. Your presence means the world to us, and most importantly, to the women and girls that we serve in our programs. And a very special thank you to Zahra. Your work and the work of your colleagues is nothing short of courageous and amazing. Thank you for speaking truth to power and for amplifying the voices that others try to silence. We're also deeply grateful to Marie Gordon. Where's Marie? There she is in the back. Woo! Whose incredible vision, energy, and dedication helped bring this event to life, and also last year, she was leading the event last year. And to the many, many volunteers and sponsors that were mentioned already who have supported this evening, thank you. And because of you, tonight isn't just an event, it's a moment of unity and togetherness and creating impact together. And so for those who may be new to our work, Right to Learn Afghanistan, formerly Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan, is a Canadian registered charity that's been around since 1998. And since then, we've supported education for Afghan women and girls wherever they are and whatever barriers they face. From scholarships, libraries, teacher training, to our online secondary school that's currently serving nearly 800 Afghan girls. We're finding new ways to make learning possible, even under the most difficult circumstances. So tonight is about solidarity. It's not about turning away, it's about standing with Afghan women and girls as they demand their right to learn, to be heard, and to be free. Thank you.
All right, so here is how the evening will unfold. Tonight, after we've heard from our wonderful guest speaker, Zahra, we will invite journalist Graham Thompson to moderate a question and answer period for 15 or 20 minutes so that we can bring you all into the discussion, and you can ask the questions that you want to ask and comment on what you've digested from the evening. We would ask that nobody record the question and answer and post much online other than the promotion of Right to Learn. We want to be sensitive to not putting anybody at risk and divulging perhaps sensitive details about how this learning is activated in Afghanistan and beyond. So just be sensitive to that. After the Q&A, you'll stay with me for a while. Not that long, it'll be super fun. And we'll do a little auction and you'll get out your credit cards, but we'll talk more about that later. So the topic of tonight's talk is, as you know, journalism as resistance, how Afghan women journalists cover the Taliban with our esteemed guest speaker, Zahra Nader. Zahra is an Afghan journalist and the editor-in-chief of Zan Times, an award-winning newsroom in exile that reports on human rights violation in Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. She leads a team of mostly women journalists, both inside the country and in exile. She was a 2024-25 Knight Wallace Fellow at the University of Michigan, where she researched business models for not-profit media in exile. Zahra has reported for both local and international media, including the New York Times in Kabul. She holds a master's degree in communication and culture from York University in Toronto and is pursuing a PhD in gender, feminist, and women's studies. Zan Times is a woman-led investigative newsroom that covers human rights violations in Afghanistan with a focus on women and the LGBTQ+ community. They are a group of mainly women journalists working both inside and outside of Afghanistan to tell their own stories, raising their voices to shape and inform public discourse. Ms. Nader was selected to represent civil society at the UN Security Council Open Debate on Women, Peace, and Security in October of 2022. She spoke in her capacity as a journalist and the editor-in-chief of Zan Times. Afghan women are the largest imprisoned population in the world. Zahra Nader exemplifies the kind of courage it takes to utilize her agency as a person and a journalist to challenge the misogynist policies aimed at making women invisible. And tonight, we will hear her thoughts on what it means to deny 20 million women their basic human rights just because they are women. Ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening, friends, colleagues, and fellow Edmontonians. Thank you for being here tonight, listening to the stories of Afghan women and standing in solidarity with them. It means so much to me to be here with you tonight in Edmonton, a city I now call home. I'm here to talk about something very personal, the power of journalism as resistance. But first, I want to thank the organizer of the event, the Right to Learn Afghanistan, and all the volunteers team that make this possible, and also the MacEwan University for co-hosting this in this beautiful space. When I was thinking about what should I tell you tonight that worth your time, I thought of starting with why. Why am I a journalist? And why Zan Times exists? Tonight is unlike any talk I have given before, because tonight I am speaking in the presence of someone who have shaped my sense of right and wrong. I am speaking in the presence of the woman who taught me no matter what I do and who I became, I must remain truthful. She taught me to stand on the side of powerless, to stand with people. I am speaking of my mother, Fatima, daughter of Sohrab, as she proudly calls herself. She never had the chance to go to school. To say she didn't have the right to education might not be factually accurate because there was no school in her village. My mother and her sisters are the only survivor of a family of 7. All of her family members died in the span of 9 days during an epidemic. She was raised by her grandparents, who married her off to my dad at the age of 16. And by the standard of her community, she was already too old. In my father's village too, there was no school. In Espagao village in Bamiyan, where I spent my early childhood, there was no school. And then I remember hearing my parents say, the Taliban came. I saw how food became scarce. Literally, our neighbors didn't even have dry bread to eat. Even though I didn't understand why our relatives, our neighbors, didn't have anything to eat, I saw hunger in front of my eyes. I saw what it means to not have food. And that was when my parents decided to flee to Iran. Until that point, I didn't know what school was, but I remember my mother taking my hand every morning and walking me from school to school, begging the principals to let me in, to allow me to sit in a classroom and learn how to read and write. But they denied me that right. And every time they said no, my mother cried. She wiped her tears with the corner of her chador. She didn't stop. She took me to another school and another until all the schools in our neighborhood said no. I didn't know what school was, but my 6-year-old self understood that it was something important to my mother. And from that moment, I fell in love with the idea of school, of learning, and that love has never been satisfied. To this day, I am in search of learning, of growth. My journey started with my mother. She eventually found a literacy teacher, Farishta Arapur, an Iranian woman I will never forget, who let me and my sister into her class. I sat among adult Iranian women who had brides and grooms and many stories of their own, and there I learned how to read and write. I have lots of sad and traumatic stories of experiencing racism in Iran, which I don't want to burden you with tonight. But the reason I chose to tell this story is for you to understand why I do what I do. I grew up in a family of 6 daughters and two brothers, and my mother was always strict on principle. Her values were built on helping others, especially those at the bottom of society. She fed elderly people whose children refused to care for them, gave shelter to women fleeing abusive husbands, and bought gifts for orphans. At the time, I used to argue with her about how much she was giving away our resources, our staff. In fact, one time, she gave away one of my new shoes, which I still remember. Although at the time I didn't understand it and certainly didn't appreciate it, she was building a strong foundation in me, a strong code of principle which said you have to be on the side of the oppressed, the poor, the people who have nothing. Everyone is busy serving people who have, she used to say. You should serve those who don't have. But now you might be wondering, the title of this talk is about journalism in resistance and why she's telling us a story of her mother. But bear with me. I'm a very talkative woman, one who grew up in Afghanistan, and I often blame my culture for our need to provide context, for our tendency to take a while to take to the main topic. But the foundation my mother built in me was the foundation for journalism, because I see journalism as a profession that allows us to stand on the side of people, on the side of facts and truth. When I became a journalist in Kabul, I wanted to tell stories from the margin, from places where people didn't have access to media or to journalists. Women's stories always interested me because I was myself a woman living in what was often considered one of the worst places on the earth to be a woman, even before the Taliban came to power. I tried to bring women's perspective into my reporting, but in the conservative society of Afghanistan, there was always a limit to what you could do as a journalist, and especially as a woman. Too often, women in management role in the media didn't have real power to shape or transform media culture. In my experience, they were often symbolic figures there to attract donor money. I didn't feel supported or mentored by them. In fact, in my experience, it was mostly men who held managerial positions and had the power to make decisions. And one of those men in 2015 told me to my face, "You can never be a good journalist in Afghanistan because you're a woman." So you can imagine the kind of discrimination I was facing. When I moved to Canada in 2017, I found it difficult, if not impossible, to return to journalism. But luckily for me, I got a chance to study. And as I said earlier, I had fallen in love with learning, and I had never felt more satisfied than I did while studying at a university in Canada. In my first few months, I understood why the society was moving forward toward progress. it was because of the production of knowledge that happens here. And that's why I am so honored to be speaking at MacEwan University tonight. Universities are holy places for me. To have the chance to speak here means the world. But let me get back to the point. As I told you, Afghans love to get off topic, as my son always proudly puts it. In August 2021, I was in Toronto in the second year of my PhD. My plan was to return to Afghanistan in the summer of 2022 to do field research for my dissertation. I secretly dreamed of teaching at Kabul University's newly launched Gender and Women Studies department. All of those dreams were shattered the moment the Taliban entered Kabul and raised their white flag. I knew right then that school and education for girls, as we had known it, was gone. And I knew that women journalists would be the first target of the Taliban for obvious reasons. In 4 months, Reporters Without Borders said that from every 5 women journalists working in Afghanistan, 4 have lost their job. And I could only imagine what that 5th journalist, the one who stayed, was facing. After crying for the loss of my country, I asked, what can I do? And I remembered, I'm a journalist. I know how to report. And I remembered what my mother taught me, that this is my responsibility to stand on the side of the people, on the side of the powerless. So I decided to support women journalists on the ground, those who caught at the intersection of 2 oppressions, being a journalist and being a woman. I started talking to friends, colleagues I had worked with before. I told them about building a newsroom that focuses on human rights, that hold the Taliban accountable, that creates opportunities and alternative spaces for women journalists to continue their work. That led to the creation of Zan Times. Zan means woman in Farsi Dari, and Zan Times became our way of resisting the Taliban. When organizing this talk, I thought, should I start with the statistics? Should I list how many media have been shut down, or how many journalists have lost their jobs, or that women journalists are being hit the hardest in a country where women are the main target of oppression? And instead, I decided to tell you stories you might not be able to find on the internet. Let me tell you how Zan Times operates. We launched Zan Times in August 2022. We made the decision to make the protection and support of our journalists the first priority and be committed to ethical journalism. While our broader mission is to cover human rights violation under the Taliban rule, we chose to focus on women and LGBTQ people, the 2 groups at the very bottom of society. And to cover their lives and experiences of oppression, we knew we couldn't measure success with Facebook followers, retweets, or likes. We had to protect the people brave enough to share their stories, and also the journalists brave enough to report the truth in a country where independent journalism is a crime. Most of our journalists on the grounds are women. I remember interviewing Sana from southern Afghanistan. I asked her why she wanted to become a journalist at a time when telling the truth could cost her life. She said, I want to be the voice of women in my province. She said, if you give me the opportunity to tell the stories of women in my community, women who have never been heard, you gave me a purpose. The Taliban took that away from me when they banned me from university, when they made it impossible for me to have a dream. She was among 533 applicants who applied to work with Zan Times, and she asked me to give her a chance. And I am so happy that I did. Over the past 3 years, Sana has reported fearlessly from shadows. She told the stories of widow and women heads of household who face daily harassment, of child marriages, of women health workers struggling under the Taliban rule, of women with disabilities, nomadic women, and children suffering from abuse. Her work has been co-published by international media like The Guardian, informing a global audience of what is happening in today's Afghanistan. To say it's difficult to be a woman journalist in Afghanistan, especially in the South, is an understatement. Every time Sana leaves home, she risks not only her life, but her family's safety. She told me 3 challenges weigh on her. First, working under a pseudonym makes it hard to build trust with sources. This is what she told me. People are scared to talk to journalists, she said. They think we are spies. Second, she must be accompanied by a mahram, a male guardian, whenever she leaves home. Her father and brother both work, so scheduling interviews means constantly adjusting plans. Third, she must prepare 3 different cover stories, plausible lies to use if the Taliban stop her en route to interview. Depending on where she's going, she chooses which story might keep her and her mahram safe. This fear, this constant trauma can feel paralyzing, and yet she continues. Her strength, she told me, comes partly from her father. Even every time my father sees one of my stories on Zan Times website, she said, he says, I am so proud of you. I never imagined my daughter would become the voice of women in southern Afghanistan. One of the stories Sandro reported on was about an 8-year-old girl named Sharifa. Let me read part of that report. Sharifa, 8, sat in front of the World Food Program's office every day, waiting for the UN agency to distribute food. When it begins, she moves forward, but not to place an official handout in her white sacks. She's there to collect the grains of wheat, rice, peas, and beans that fall out of the sacks of other people. I approached her and started a conversation, asking her what she is doing there alone. People in here get flowers, rice, peas, and other food items as aid every day, she says in a slow, gentle voice. Sometimes the sacks have holes in them and grains fall off them. I collect these grains and take them home for my mother to cook for us. Besides collecting grains from WFP office lineup, Sharifa also begs for money to buy breads for her family. Some days she can only get 30 Afghanis, enough to buy 3 loaves of bread. Sharifa, her 3 sisters, and their mother live in a 1-bedroom house with no kitchen and no bathroom. It looks more like a ruin. Her mother, Amina, says their misery began 2 years ago when her father, an army soldier, was killed. When her husband, the army soldier, was killed. Sana is not allowed to work. In fact, the Taliban have banned her very existence outside the home. Yet she still finds a way to tell stories of girls like Sharifa and women like Amina. It is women like Sana who are doing real journalism in today's Afghanistan. They take personal risk to tell stories of those at the bottom of society. I am so proud to support her, to help her do journalism that makes the Taliban uncomfortable and accountable. This is what I mean by journalism as resistance. It is not easy, but it is necessary. It is the journalists on the ground who are risking their lives to report the truth. This is not only the case in Afghanistan. We are seeing it globally, especially in Gaza, where journalists are paying the cost of truth with their lives. Without their sacrifices, we might never know what is happening. And before I close, let me tell you one more story about my mother. See, I love my mother so much. For the first time in her life, at the age of 63, she has a right to education. She's attending ESL classes and dream of one day going to university. That to me is the definition of resistance. That is resilience. I know that every Afghan woman and girls share this hunger for learning, for growth, and for becoming. And I want to thank you for being here tonight, for standing with them, for making it possible for some to continue their education, whether in underground classes or through a screen. Your presence here tonight gives me hope. It shows that you care. And as long as there are people who care, there is hope for change. Thank you so much.